Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is it's a really horrific and brutal case. Oh, honestly, just looking into it just broke my heart. But it is the murders of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom back in 2007. What happened to them was brutal. It was beyond horrific. So just a little warning there. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, and if you want to find that out, obviously you can look it up fully, but I just don't think there's a need because it's just horrific. This case was suggested by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions that you guys have, and of course if you do have any more, please do let me know. Channon Gail Christian was born on the 29th of April in 1985 to Gary and Dina, and that was in Texas. She moved from Louisiana to Tennessee with her family in 1997. In 2003, she graduated Fargo High School and ended up becoming a senior that was majoring in sociology at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. She actually planned on graduating in December of 2007. Channon was also an avid golf player and absolutely adored the sport, and she was 21 years old when she was murdered. Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr. He was mainly referred to as Chris, so that's how I'm going to refer to him. He was born on the 21st of September in 1983 to parents Mary and Hugh, and that was also in the US in Knoxville. He loved to play baseball. He ended up playing it at Hall High School for the Red Devils, and he graduated there in 2003. After he went to high school, he went to Pellissippi State Technical Community College, where he would train to become a carpenter, and that is what he did. Now, Christopher was 23 years old when he was murdered. That is a bit of background about the pair that we are talking about today. Now, back in January of 2007, they were a brand new couple. They had not long since started dating, but they were enjoying each other's company, you know. They were enjoying exploring their relationship and just having fun with it. So let's go to the 6th of January in 2007. It was that fateful day. Now, the couple had actually planned to go to dinner, and then they were going to go to a friend's house, I believe, as like a party to celebrate a birthday or something along those lines. That was their plans. So Channon went to a friend's apartment to go and get ready, and that is where she decided to wait for Chris. Now, she had said that she wanted to wait for him to come and pick her up, so that basically that she would meet them at the party kind of thing. And he was supposed to come around 8 p.m. So Shannon's there, she's waiting for Chris to come and arrive, and her friends and Chris's friends are expecting to see them at this party. But the pair never made it to the party, which was obscure because, you know, that's where they were going to be. They were literally getting ready to go there. So why did they never end up going? The friends, like, obviously got worried. They began trying to ring them, call them, that's the same thing, text them. You know, they got no response, which worried them even more. When it got to 11 p.m, they began worrying even more. So they decided that they were going to go around to the apartment that Channon was last seen in and to see what was going on. You know, what if Chris had come and they'd got distracted, you know, all lovey-dovey and stuff like that. So anyway, just to check on them, they wanted to go down there and have a look. So they did, and they found that Chris's truck was in the parking lot, but Shannon's SUV type vehicle that she had was not. That was gone. Now, both Chris and Channon actually lived with their parents at the time. Chris's parents said that, you know, he was 23. They often didn't see him for a couple of days or something like that, you know, and it was kind of normal. But Channon had actually told her mother that she wasn't staying out at her friends that night, that she was going to come home. So her mother decided to wait up for her, but she never came home. And then on the next day, the 7th, she ends up getting a phone call from Shannon's work, who were asking where she was because she never turned up. And that was when panic massively set in. She called round her friends, and they confirmed that the couple never even made it to the party. So obviously something had gone very wrong somewhere. Something was up. And so they called the police, and obviously Chris's parents were also informed. The authorities, like normal, couldn't act until 24 hours had passed because they were both adults, and, you know, maybe they'd just gone off somewhere and wanted some alone time. So, you know, they had to wait for that. And in that meantime, the parents are at home just hoping that their children call them and just anxiously waiting for that to happen. And because they were just worried and didn't really want to sit around and do nothing, obviously you're not going to want to do that when your child is missing. So they began trying to look into it themselves. They contacted Shannon's mobile phone provider to see, you know, whether they could get any information from that. They could confirm that one of the last pings on her phone was at around the Cherry Street area, and apparently that was a pretty rough place to be. Like, it was full of crime and things like that, and she wouldn't have assumed that her daughter would go there willingly, at least. Some friends go around that area and they end up finding Shannon's SUV, which had been abandoned. When they looked inside, they found it very strange because she always took really good care of her car, kept it clean, you know, and just looked after it. But when they looked inside, the floor was covered in mud, and the seat was also pushed really far back. Too far back for Channon to be the one driving. She wouldn't have been able to reach the pedals with how far back it was. So that led them to believe that she was not the one driving her own car. Obviously, the police were called. They come and look at the car, and they found that photographs were missing. There was an iPod in there, or an iPad I believe, and that was missing. They found some fingerprint evidence. I believe they found some sort of cigarettes or something like that, and they also found fingerprints on them, and those fingerprints would lead them to an address, 2316 Chipman Street. It was only 2 blocks away from where Shannon's car was found. Those prints that they found actually matched someone in their database. They matched to a man called Lamarcus D. Davidson. He was a known carjacker, and this was when the dark and dismal and horrific story started to come together. A burnt out body was found close by some railway tracks, and it was discovered to be that of Chris's. I believe one of the detectives or policemen or something like that there actually recognized Chris and basically phoned his family and told them that, you know, that was his son. When he said, "How do you know?" he said, "I recognize his eyes." There was a sweatshirt wrapped around the head. Socks had been stuffed in like the mouth as a gag, and his ankles were tied up. They were tied up with his own belt, and I believe his hands were secured behind his back too. Now, he also had muddy feet, so it is believed that whoever obviously murdered Chris made him walk barefooted to the area where the tracks were, where they basically killed him execution style. He had multiple gunshot wounds and then had been doused in gasoline and set on fire to try and basically cover up any evidence that was left behind, but they did actually find some. They found semen inside of Chris, so as you can imagine, he had also been sexually assaulted. Going back to what actually happened that day, Chris did manage to get to Channon. He went in to collect her. They both go outside about to get in the car, and they share like a loving kiss and embrace just before they get in the car. And then all of a sudden, a gun is held to the back of their heads. They had been spotted by a gang of carjackers, and those carjackers wanted that car, and they were gonna take it, basically. Now, you normally think that, like, a carjacking, they take the car, they leave the people. That's what normally happens. However, I believe that this gang were, like, spooked because they saw a pair of headlights coming around the corner. Obviously, they didn't want to get caught, and so they just shoved the couple into the car, jumped in, and drove off. They took them to a house just near, like, Shipping Street, which was close to a waste management and recycling plant, and there were 5 people in this gang. Those 5 people were Letelvis D. Cobbins, Lamarcus D. Davidson, George Thomas, Eric Boyd, and Vanessa Coleman. Lamarcus was actually fresh out of prison, and he was on parole for previous carjackings. As I said, they were well known for it. The other people that I mentioned were staying within minutes of the house. The 5 of them were described as being very unstable, always in sort of a life of crime, and apparently, you know, decided that day that they were fed up of having no money and decided that he was going to go out and, you know, jack a car and make some money off it. And that is when they came across the couple. Chris was murdered first. He was seriously beaten. He was sexually assaulted. This was all done in front of Channon. They made her watch, which is just so horrific. Then they made Christopher walk to the rail track where they eventually took his life. They shot him. I believe they shot him twice, and he was still alive, and then they shot him again in the head, and that is when he died. They then set him on fire to try and get rid of any evidence. During this time, Channon was actually left in the house with Vanessa, and Vanessa was equally compliant in this because she didn't try and help her. She didn't try and get her out or anything like that. She just watched over her to make sure she didn't escape, I guess. And when the guys got back, they ended up setting on to Channon. They tied her up. They savagely beat her. They savagely sexually assaulted her, which I'm not going to get into because they're just so awful. Channon was then strangled. She was beaten some more. Basically until she was unconscious. They then tied her in the fetal position, and they poured a chemical substance inside of her and all over her body in an attempt to destroy any evidence. They then put her in 5 trash bags and stuffed her in the bin in the kitchen. And she was still alive at that point. She must have been suffering so much, I just can't even imagine. Because her actual cause of death was like suffocation. So they left her in there alive, and she slowly suffocated to death. So now let's go back to where the police found the DNA evidence on Channon's car. That led them to this house. This was the 9th of January, so it was 2 days later when they got there. And that is when they found Shannon's body in the trash can. And all over those trash bags, they had Lamarcus Davidson's prints on them. They were everywhere. They found semen on her jumper, in her jeans, just everywhere. The police also found bullet casings that were the same as the gun used to kill Chris. The case was pretty sort of cut and dry, I guess. Like they had evidence, they had fingerprints on these guys straight away, and then on the 11th of January, the five of them were arrested. On the 16th of April 2008, Eric Boyd was found guilty as an accessory to a fatal carjacking. He was the first to go to trial and the only suspect not charged with murder. He was sentenced to the maximum of 18 years in federal prison. On the 25th of August 2009, Letelvis Cobbins was found guilty of the murder. He faced the possibility of the death penalty because he was convicted of first-degree felony murder. He was found guilty of facilitating the murder of Chris, but he was acquitted on Shannon's sexual assault. On the 26th of August, he was sentenced to life without parole. On the 28th of October 2009, Lamarcus Davidson was found guilty. It was found that he should receive the death penalty on 4 capital charges. In June 2010, he was sentenced to 80 years for other charges related to the murders. On the 8th of December 2009, George Thomas was found guilty in multiple counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Vanessa Coleman was granted immunity by federal authorities for testimony in the case for the carjacking. On the 30th of May 2010, she was acquitted of first-degree murder and found guilty of lesser charges. And in July of that year, was sentenced to 53 years in prison. This case, honestly, was so brutal and so horrific. I've watched a documentary on the both parents of the victims speaking about their children, and it's just so upsetting.
Slide right over the arm of that chair, would sit in my lap, put her arm around me, and look at me a certain way, Daddy. And I would get this feeling that would come over me like, this is gonna cost me.
To have your children taken away from you like that, they have advised people to always tell their children that they love them, because some of them were lucky enough to say that day. Shannon's parents were lucky enough to tell her that day because they said, you don't know when it's your last. And it's just so horrific, them recalling what their children used to do, and just that how horrifically they were taken away is just honestly heartbreaking.
If I sit down in that chair and shut my eyes, I can feel her do it, and it sure feels good. And when I open them, I got a rage in me you wouldn't believe. A hate in me that ain't normal.
My heart goes out to both families. That house that they were taken to, where they were brutally tortured and murdered, it was actually bought by, I'm not entirely sure who, but someone who was local. And then in 2008, they actually bulldozed the entire place and they set up a memorial for Channon and Christopher. That is a better use for that horrific house to have a memorial there for them instead of it standing there and being like a horrible blight on the community. I believe every year like a golf tournament is held in Shannon's memory because again she adored golf. And the same for Christopher with baseball. They hold a baseball tournament for him, well, in his memory every year. And I believe they give away scholarships and things like that to one lucky person at the end of it, which is a really nice thing to have in their memory too. This case is horrific. What happened to these two is horrific. Can you imagine just going to your car and just sharing a kiss with a loved one and then having a gun pointed to your head and being forced into it and then tortured? I just honestly can't. You just can't even think about it. It shocked the community and it made them rethink a few things on how people, you know, wanted to like be safe. They probably just jumped in the cars and locked the door straight away. You just don't even think stuff like that's going to happen, but it does, and it's awful. My heart goes out to both families and everyone who's involved in this case and just affected by it. But yeah, that is the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.